Greetings, Jelly Spoons, and welcome back to another episode of Monday Madness, the show where I talk about anything and everything that's come into my brain, and yeah, you guys get to listen to it. Excellent. So another Monday has come upon us, and today I'm going to be talking about my favourite subject in the entire world again. Yes, that's right, I'm back on the Peter Pan content. Now, I am back on the Peter Pan content specifically because I've gained quite a lot of interest in my Peter Pan fact videos over on TikTok. Check them out if you would like to, if you have TikTok. One of the videos that got quite a lot of traction most recently was about gender identity in the Neverland, and that's what I'm talking to you about today. So, welcome to today's video on Peter Pan lore, entitled Gender Identity and its Representation in the Lore of the Neverland. Before we start, once again diving in with my sponsor for today, which is myself. This year I've given myself a 1-year challenge. Last year I did a 12 months of cosplay challenge, and each month I made a brand new costume. You can see that journey here. This year I am doing a 1-year movie challenge where I am making a movie about my favourite topic of all time, Peter Pan. The movie is called Never Never, and it's going to be released on the 27th of December. It is going to be very low, low budget, and it's going to star mostly myself because in these wonderful Pandoramic times, I don't want to bring anyone else in. However, there are ways that you guys can help and get involved if you would like to. So if you would like to get involved and support my general chaosness and potentially support this 1-year Neverland project that I am making, you guys can go to my Ko-fi page and you can support me on there, or you can go to my Patreon where you can support me every single month. If you support me on Ko-fi or Patreon, I'm trying to give you guys something in return. So if you support me on either of those platforms, I will be sending out a questionnaire later in the year while I am making some of the little puppet creatures that inhabit my Neverland world, and you guys will get to design your own creature. You can tell me what you want them to look like, from skin tone to hair color, that kind of thing, and they will be put into my world specifically for you as a thank you for backing me. People backing me on Patreon at the very end of the year when the movie is finished will also get to have dibs on various different creatures and puppets that I make, which you guys will then get sent out to you to keep of your very own, to try and keep some of the magic of this crazy movie alive. Everyone on Patreon will also get some extra perks and benefits here and there as well, so head on over to my Patreon to find out more about those, and over to my Ko-fi if you don't want to support me every month. I am a large commitment, I understand this, but if you'd still quite like to design your own little creature as well. While you're over on my Ko-fi page, I do of course also have commissions! I've opened them back up again for the brand new year. I do in-character personalised message commissions. I do quite a lot of birthdays, and I cannot over-exaggerate this. One of the most popular characters is of course my Peter Pan character, who has, done many birthdays, but I do other ones as well. You can get a personalised message for yourself or for somebody else from Mollymauk, Tea Leaf, Lucien the Nonagon. I always do that face when I'm doing Lucien as well. Lucien the Nonagon. Well, if no one else will love him, I will. We also have Kingsley Tea Leaf, the swashbuckling pirate. Or you can also get a personalised Shakespearean soliloquy by Puck from A Midsummer Night's Dream. So yes, personalised in-character messages could be yours for your very own, or to send as a gift to somebody else. Of course, if you cannot support me in any of those ways, but you would still like to give me some support and some love, you guys can just chuck a like down on this video, make sure you are subscribed, and get all your friends to subscribe to me as well, of course. Make sure you're following me on my Instagram and or my TikTok if you have those things, and chuck a comment down in the comments below. Let me know what you guys are up to, and let me know what you think of some of the things I'm going to be talking about in this video. Alright, let's get on to some Neverland lore. I'm going to preface this video by saying that while I'm talking about gender and its representation in the Neverland, I am only going to be talking about the story and the lore itself. I'm not going to be talking about any of the actors who played these characters over time, mostly because I personally feel that as long as the actor is absolutely superb and it is not done for a gimmick, which sadly I have seen done in a few shows, I believe that anyone of any gender can play any of the roles in this story. So while I'm talking about gender representation in this story, I am talking about the characters themselves, the creatures and the world and the lore itself. Nothing like the actors in the shows, etc. Alright, let's talk about gender. Even today, in the 21st century, finding good representation of different genders across the entire spectrum can be challenging. I'm going to be taking you on a journey backwards in time over 100 years ago to 1904 and 1911 when the Peter Pan play and the novel were first brought out into the world, and showing you why I think the lore of Peter Pan and the Neverland actually is very inclusive of multiple genders. So let's dive right in with a fairly simple question to start with. Were there ever any lost girls? The short answer to that question is yes. The longer answer, and I think more interesting answer, is well, from what I've been able to find, there is absolutely no reason why not. I would like to go into this discussion by first telling you this. I personally have always seen Lost Boys as a title and not a description. I think that they would be exactly the same if they were called The Mighty Nine or Mystery Incorporated. So with that, I'm going to talk about the idea of lost girls. We start with the obvious then. We have Wendy Darling. Wendy Darling, as we all know, went away to the Neverland and then came back and grew up. She had a daughter named Jane. Jane then got taken to the Neverland, came back and grew up. Then she had a daughter called Margaret. Margaret then grew up and had another daughter, and this carried on down that family's bloodline. While none of these girls were lost and therefore sent to the Neverland, nonetheless they did still go and have time on the island. So there are clear canonical examples of girls existing with the lost boys there. Something else I want to say on this is that all we have is Peter's word on the matter. All we know is that at one point in the Darlings' nursery, Peter, trying to coax Wendy out of being annoyed with him after he had scorned her a little bit, said the following: "One girl is more use than 20 boys." And then, in answer to Wendy's question about whether there were any lost girls on the island, Peter said, "Girls are much too clever to fall out of their prams. Falling out of your pram, being lost and then unclaimed, is the manner in which most of the lost boys were sent to the Neverland over the years." The thing is though, Peter himself cannot remember anything for very long. Within 1 year of the Darlings and those lost boys returning home to Bloomsbury, Peter had forgotten both Tinkerbell and Captain Hook. Within 3 years, he had also forgotten Wendy and did not return for her until many years later when she was a grown-up. So you see, Peter would not remember. If there were lost girls on the island, he would forget them just as easily as he forgets all the others. The 6 lost boys that we meet in the play and the novel were not the first, the last, or the only lost boys on the island either. Barry describes how Peter would thin them out if they showed signs of growing up, which was against the rules. The boys on the island vary, of course, in numbers, according as they get killed and so on. But at this time, there were 6 of them. So, you see, Nibs, Curly, Slightly, Tootles, and the twins were not the first. There had been countless other lost boys on the island before them and would be many afterwards. And of these, who knows how many gender identities could exist there? Peter will never remember, and so we may freely speculate. Then again, say we take it as read that there had never been any lost girls on the island, before the Darlings came at least. That does not mean that there could never be in the future. As times wear on, wars come and go, society shifts and changes, maybe so too with this notion that girls were much too clever to be lost at all. Then again, how are we to know that any of the children on the island, including the 6 lost boys that we meet, are in fact boys at all? There could easily be tomboys amongst them, there could be transgender, there could be agender, there could be gender fluid, any number of gender identities existing already in there. I will stop here though, because I think that the acceptance that there could be is enough. And to be quite honest, I would find prying into the text to pluck apart these characters down to the bones a little bit cruel. After all, they are just children. And really, all we need is that could. I will pop in here quickly though to say that while I was reading through the play again just to check some facts for this video, I did discover that the second twin is never referred to by any pronouns at all, so make of that what you will. So that was the Lost Boys, but what about Peter? As I discussed in my review of the book Peter Darling by Austen Chant, don't read it. It can be very easy to use Peter Pan as a symbol, an allegory, or a metaphor for the transgender experience. Feeling that you just do not fit, taking flight to some place where you are free and in control, not to mention Peter's own struggles with identity crisis when he is half human and half bird, all of that can be very easy to scoop up and dump down into a triumphant metaphor for the transgender representation that is deserved. And while I, in particular, being on my own fun little gender journey from gender fluid to actually more like trans masc, which is just great fun to discover this late in life, woohoo, polyamorous pan, etc., I relate entirely to that feeling of wanting to be your true self, of feeling like you're in the wrong body, etc., completely. All I will say is that, like in my Peter Darling review, I think to put that on Peter Pan is unnecessary. His gender is entirely irrelevant, and personally, I think, much like his sexuality, he doesn't have one. It is deeply important to this character that he always remain a little boy and have fun. But it is the boy as opposed to man that is key here. He would be saying exactly the same thing if he was saying little girl or child. So while I openly say that Peter can be viewed as any gender, personally, I feel that he is not the character to be pinning such weighty and important labels onto. He is first and foremost a child, eternal, unhuman, unearthly, and untouchable. I think it's just unnecessary to attach anything else, particularly when we can find much more readily available examples of gender representation everywhere else in the story. Let's carry on then. There is one very clear and particular case of gender identity representation in Peter Pan the Story and the Lore of the Neverland, and that belongs to the fairies. As described in both the 1904 play and the 1911 novel, mauve fairies are boys, white ones are girls, and there are some colours who don't know what they are. This is very simple evidence then. Some fairies in the Neverland are neither male nor female, and they can be any colour as well. Now, in the 1911 novel, it was changed so it's the blue fairies who wear any gender at all. But I am going to choose to go with the play version here, not only because I'm a theatre kid and therefore the stage is just my favourite medium for seeing Peter Pan, but also because I just think having fairies of multiple colours is way more fun. And now I'm just imagining a literal rainbow of fairies of all different genders flying around in a big rainbow flag, and personally I think that's just amazing. Seriously, come back me on Ko-fi or Patreon, you can have your very own multicoloured fairy. I also love the fact that J.M. Barrie included this detail at all. It was important enough to him to not only include in the text, but as spoken dialogue as well. Now, I am a Peter Pan hobbyist and obsessionist. Did my dissertation on Peter Pan, know a great deal. I literally write essays all the time about it for these videos. It's great, I love it. What I am not is a J.M. Barrie expert. I have delved a little bit into his life story. I've read letters that he has sent, I've read through his speeches, I've read the biography that was penned by Dennis McHale, and many accounts by people who were lucky enough to have known him. But still, I would not consider myself nearly educated enough to speak about J.M. Barrie with any particular authority. So the only thing I will say at this point is this. From reading everything that I have and speaking with other people in the J.M. Barrie and Peter Pan community, I believe that J.M. Barrie, much like Peter Pan, was a non-sexual being. I believe his very nature was definitely not the same as most men would have been back at the time, and he was certainly unusual. Which is why I feel fairly confident in guessing, at least, that the idea of some creatures in his world not conforming to the typical notions of gender, particularly back then, and sexuality as well, but that really is another video for another time, would have come very easily to J.M. Barrie. I think these fairies in particular are special because they tie so nicely to their author in such a blunt and matter-of-fact way. Some don't know what they are. Simple, beautiful, simple. Stretching out now to the other inhabitants of the Neverland, I'm going to touch on Tiger Lily and her people first. Tiger Lily is described as female, and there's another character called Great Big Little Panther, sometimes just Panther, who is described as male, but the rest of her people have no real descriptions and no gender identities. Because of this, I feel that we can freely speculate on any number of gender identities that could be tumbling about there. Particularly because these are some of the growing up characters. That is to say, they are neither immortal nor children. They go from child to adult, they live, they die, they have descendants, they continue on for generation after generation. This, I think, means that they could have a much better understanding of their own gender identity simply because they will grow up and get to experience more of it, more than, say, the Lost Boys would. Then we come to the pirates, starting with their captain, Captain James Hook. Captain Hook is described as male and given he/him pronouns. There is a description of him, though, that I find particularly interesting. There is a touch of the feminine in Hook, as in all the best pirates. We could take that quote and run with it in a myriad of different directions, from transgender to gender fluid to gay to pansexual, and talk about all those kinds of things. What I personally take from it is that Captain Hook himself and his author were aware that there was a sort of spectrum of different genders and identities. Listen to some of the other ways J.M. Barrie describes Captain Hook. His hair was dressed in long curls. His eyes were of the blue of the forget-me-not and of a profound melancholy. The elegance of his diction, one of a different caste from his crew. In dress, he somewhat aped the attire of Charles II, having heard it said in some earlier part of his career that he bore a strange resemblance to the ill-fated Stuarts. There was a touch of the feminine in Hook, and he loved flowers and sweet music. None of those descriptions, particularly when looking at them from the 21st century point of view, seem to have any fix on what gender they particularly belong to. You could, however, stack them all together to get a gauge on Hook. And I think you'll find that this is a man who definitely does not fit particularly snugly into what would be defined as masculine, particularly back in 1904. You can think whatever you like, of course. As for me, I personally, having mulled over all this information, now actually see Hook as leaning towards fluid. I think Captain Hook could very easily use he, him, and they, them pronouns. None of this is hidden, remember. He isn't keeping any aspect of his personality, his tastes, or his hobbies hidden from anyone, including his crew. While the captain does clearly struggle throughout the play with notions of the morality of good and bad form, his own fate, and whether he'll have a long-lasting legacy, I think that his gender identity is a place where he's actually very comfortable and confident. Taking all of this on board then. On board, do you get it? Pirate joke, pirate humour, unintentional pirate humour, I am a pirate. Wherever you think Captain Hook falls on the gender spectrum, and please tell me your ideas down in the comments below, the thing I think we can take away from Captain Hook as a character is that he is a very positive piece of gender representation. Wherever you now believe he falls on the gender spectrum is kind of irrelevant. The point is that Captain Hook is an example of positivity, of how you can be anything that you want, and he is, without shame and without hiding it. And because this is shown as nothing that he should be ashamed of, and indeed he isn't, I reckon, yeah, that's a point for positivity and really good gender representation right there in Captain Hook. Moving on to the rest of the pirates then. The rest of the crew are either described as male or just the crew. So once more, I think that we can feel free to speculate. I see absolutely no reason why any of the pirates on board the Jolly Roger couldn't be male, female, anything in between, any number of gender identities at all. We have historical records of non-male pirates, Mary Read, Anne Bonny, etc, etc. I think we would be foolhardy to deny such possibilities in Hook's crew. Plus, I don't think Hook himself would mind. As long as you pull your weight and respect him, I don't think it would matter what gender you were. Towards the end of the Peter Pan story, Captain Hook and his pirates do attempt to kick Wendy off the ship. This is because they believe that a curse has been put upon their ship, and in desperation they decide that it must be because they have a woman aboard and therefore try to fling her over the side. However, because that idea was born out of complete terror and desperation, I don't think that simply existing as a non-male member of the crew would have been grounds to kick you off. And finally then, we have reached the other creatures on the Neverland. One easy example where I think any gender identity can fit in whatsoever are the mermaids. None of them are ever described in any great detail except for one who is a she/her and is sitting on a rock combing her hair. This, I think, actually doesn't rule out many gender possibilities at all, except maybe cis male, so make of her whatever you would like to. I think the mermaids can, just like the fairies, be anything at all, and actually I encourage this. Plus, it would be super cool to just be a fairy or a mermaid for a little bit. That would be fun. The rest of the inhabitants on the Neverland include gnomes, princes, a very small old lady with a hooked nose, neverbirds, ostriches, wolves, lions, and various other creatures like that. Any of those, as far as I'm concerned, can be of any gender whatsoever. Such is the vast amount of freedom that our imaginations are given by J.M. Barrie in this world. I hope you enjoyed listening to this sort of gender fact-finding mission I went on in the Neverland lore. The main thing I hope to give you today when talking about gender representation in the Neverland and the story of Peter Pan is just how many examples I think there are. Some of it is only a could or a read between the lines, but I don't think we should dismiss those. This is because alongside the more speculative aspects, there are also solid facts. Solid pieces of evidence of things other than cisgender characters. The fairies are of course the forefront of this, with, for me, the language used to describe Captain Hook coming in second. It is because those definite examples exist in the lore of the Neverland that I see no problem at all with reading a little deeper into it and seeing what kind of representations of the gender spectrum you feel you can find in it. I believe that anyone of any gender identity at all could find something to relate to in this story, whether that's a creature like a fairy, a pirate, or a lost boy. If you are seeking representation for any kind of gender identity at all, I firmly believe that you can find it here in this story from 1904. And to be truly honest, I think that that makes this story even more magical. Thank you for watching my wonderful jelly spoons. I'll be back next week. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Goodbye. Goodbye, scripts. Day. This is what you get for 89 pages. All right. For someone who gets told they give off so much pirate energy, I really don't know that much about piratical history, and that is something I want to look into next.